Good morning, everyone. I hope you've been keeping well in the midst of all this smoke. Boy, it has been quite smoky out there this week. Wednesday morning, I woke up and everything's orange and thinking, whoa, is it the end of the world? No, it's just wildfires again. And anyway, our thoughts and prayers are with the communities up there in northern Ontario that are being hit by these things, and with the firefighters who are working to try to get them under control and out. Anyway, we're continuing on in reading Genesis this morning, and we're looking again at the life of Jacob. We pick up in the story here, Jacob's fleeing for his life from his brother Esau, because once again he's done something that would, for lack of a better word, usurp the oldest brother and all the blessings and the Abrahamic promise and stuff that came along with being the oldest sibling in this particular family. He's at his father Isaac is very, very old. He's blind and he knows he's about to die, so he wants to bless his sons, starting with the oldest one. And Rebecca managed to set it up so that Jacob could be the first brother in by means of trickery, little, animal hair on his neck and smelling like the grass of the field and some goat stew or something. And Isaac was kind of suspicious, but it seemed that it was Esau that he was going to be blessing, but no, it was Jacob. And in that way, Jacob got his brother's blessing. He got the blessing of the oldest son in that family. Anyway, it does not fare well from that. It causes a lot of strife in the family, and so Jacob flees. He leaves where they lived down in southern Israel, Beersheba, and goes back up into northern Syria to Haran, where Abraham came from in the first place. And while he's on the way, he has a dream of a stairway to heaven. And if you've ever seen those old what they call step pyramids that were common back in the Middle East way back when, that's probably what he saw. Those ziggurats are what they call them, step pyramids. They were stairways for the gods to come down. They didn't house a temple themselves. The temple usually right beside the ziggurat, so the gods would come down the ziggurat and go to the temple to meet the people. Anyway, thought you might like to know that. So here we are reading in Genesis 28, verses 10 to 22. Jacob left Beersheba and went to Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. And taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. And your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I've done what I've promised you. Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. And he called that place Bethel, which means house of God. But the name of the city was Luz at first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my Father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give 1/10 to you. It's the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, most of you folks know I play fiddle and banjo and old-time mountain music, and many of the songs that I know come out of a particular family tradition down in West Virginia, the Hammonds family, who lived in central eastern West Virginia, Pocahontas County. They figure that the Hammonds arrived in the U.S. in the late 1700s and settled in eastern Kentucky, and eventually wound up in Pocahontas County in West Virginia, where I had lived for several years. And the reason they left Kentucky had something to do with a dream. But it wasn't what we today would call following your dreams, or even the American dream, like I like to say down there. There were a couple of literal dreams involved that wound up playing out in the awake world. And well, I just best tell you the story. It's kind of entertaining. And this is coming from Maggie Hammonds Parker. She was born in 1899, died in 1987. It's a story from her great-grandfather, and whose name she never mentioned, so not sure which Hammonds that was. And it goes back to the days when they were in Kentucky. The Hammonds at that time were one of two families of white settlers living near a place called Whitley in Kentucky, eastern Kentucky. And they lived among a lot of First Nations people, most likely the Shawnee, as best as I can figure. So that's how I will refer to them. And the whites and the Shawnee, they got along great there for a while. There was an old Shawnee man who came to visit the Hammonds every day, and they shared stories and told tall tales and jokes and all that. And then the old man often brought with him a young boy who taught one of the Hammonds kids, who was Maggie's great uncle, taught him how to hunt with the bow and arrow and how to swim. But one day, another man came with the old man, and this other man said he had had a dream the night before, and that for his people, whenever they had a dream, it had to come true. He said the dream was that he owned her great-grandfather's gun. And it was a very nice gun, a gun that under any other circumstance, he would never have parted with it, because guns were important, it's for food, for protection. But he was afraid that things might go wrong between the Shawnee and themselves, so he gave the man the gun. Well, her great-grandfather was greatly disturbed with having to part with the gun, and he troubled greatly about what to do about it. Well, a couple of weeks passed, and he got up one morning and said that he'd had a dream that night that he owned his gun again, and also one of the Shawnee's ponies. So he went to the Shawnee camp, very brave thing to do considering what he's going to do, and he told the man who had his gun this dream, that he saw himself owning the gun again and one of the ponies. Well, the Shawnee man studied him quite a bit for a while and then said, "Take it, paleface, but dream no more." So he took his gun and the pony and went back to the homestead, and a few days later the old man came to see them. And he was visibly bothered about something, but he wouldn't say what. He actually wouldn't talk at all. He just was kind of there, and they finally got him to speak, and he said for them not to tell anyone what he was going to tell them. He said the Shawnee were coming to kill them, and they'd better leave. So they grabbed what they could and they fled, all the while listening to a war party hollering behind them. And the two families, they eventually came to the Ohio River and had to swim across to get to West Virginia. And they kept heading east on up into the mountains until in a generation or so they wound up in Pocahontas County. Well, don't want to stretch things a bit here, but I think there's some similarity between their story and that of Jacob's dream. Jacob was fleeing for his life also from his brother after having stolen his father's blessing. And that's when he had his dream in which God conveyed the promise that he'd made to Abraham and to Isaac, conveyed it on to Jacob. And the Hammonds, a little out of order here, but they had to flee for their lives on the coattails of some dream-inspired events that may have involved some trickery as well, but I don't think so. Personally, I can't help but believe that by means of those dreams about a gun, God was saving the Hammonds' lives, and also a strand of West Virginia traditional music that many people treasure to this day. This event story takes place at a time when things were starting to get troubled between the Shawnee and also the Cherokee and the European settlers. They could have very easily wound up dying in a raid on them because trust was breaking down. Well, anyway, been talking about dreams, so let's talk about some dreams. I think I've opened that can of worms. In the Bible and in most every pre-scientific revolution culture, they believed dreams could be a means of communication from the divine realm to us in our everyday lives. And it's easy to understand how this could be because dreams can seem a lot like real life, but we're asleep. And so they must be like a window or a portal into someplace else. And dreams they can seem very real. They can seem very emotionally impactful. We can wake from dreams with feelings that persist for days, and that would lead us to believe there was something to that dream. Dreams can recur. You can have the same dream over and over, or parts of a dream over and over again, and that would make us think that there was something in there we needed to deal with. And sometimes in dreams we run into relatives and friends who have passed on, and they seem to have something relative to say to us sometimes, if we could remember it, and sometimes not. They're just there, and it's good to see them again. Sometimes our dreams, they can just feel so good that we wish that we could stay in that dream forever. And on the other side of that, there are nightmares where we want out of them as quick as we can get it. Sometimes we dream of something and, we wish that could happen. And sometimes we have strange dreams of walking naked through town or something like that. Interesting things these dreams are. Could there really be meaning to them? Can they tell us something? Well, interestingly, there's been a resurgence over the last few decades of people, science aside, searching for meaning and direction in their lives from their dreams. And the idea is that dreams are a window into your subconscious. And if you can figure out what's in your subconscious, you can figure out anything you want to know about yourself. Moreover, they say that the subconscious can tell you what you really want in life. It will show you the dreams you should pursue. So as you might guess, there are lots of sites on the internet where you can go to find out what a dream means. Things like if you see a black dog in your dream, this is what it means. You see a buffalo, or if you see a bird, a bluebird or something, they mean something. So this is, you can find, it's like little dictionaries. And they tell you to write down your dreams as soon as you wake up so you can figure them out and all the symbology and determine what your subconscious is telling you. Because they believe there's a divine light inside of you that your subconscious is in touch with, and if you can go there, then you'll find out what your divinity wants you to do. If you do that, you're on your way to your own unique happiness. Well, who knows? I tend to lean towards what science says myself. As best as can be determined by scientific method, there likely is not some hidden vault full of hidden treasure inside ourselves that if we can unlock it, the secrets of me and my little universe of happiness can be fully manifest, and I can be all that I'm supposed to be according to deep inner me, which is somehow divine. And sorry, I know my sarcasm is bleeding through here. There are things, yes, about ourselves that we are not aware of, that show up in patterns of behavior that we choose not to deal with. There are also emotions that weigh on us that we may not be aware that we have, but can name, but they're there. They're beliefs about ourselves that we haven't really sat down to figure out. Things that are attached to traumatic events in our lives that we've chosen not to remember because they're just too painful to bring up. That's kind of what the subconscious is. Any credible psychologist will admit that, the subconscious, it's a closed vault. And we are clueless as how to open it. And it's probably best we didn't. As far as actual dreams go, as best as anyone can tell, dreams are the brain's way of resolving what went on in a day or the last few days. The emotional weight attached to it. It's just the brain is trying to decide what to hold on to. If we have recurring dreams, there might be something there we need to deal with. And since our memory of what we dream about typically lasts just minutes past waking, maybe we best just get plenty of sleep and let the brain do what it does with these dreams, because, that's part of the brain's way of helping us stay, healthy in the mind. That said, I've had dreams or parts of dreams come true before. Things that I've seen in dreams, heard in dreams, that I've seen and heard in life. We don't have space and time here in this sermon for me to say what they were. It'd take a good 20 minutes or so, But, what the dreams were about and what came true from them wasn't life or world history changing, anything like that. And actually, they're really on the rather hilarious side of interesting. And I fully invite you to ask me what they were, because they're really funny. But anyway, there can be a hinky, if you allow me to use that word, a spooky something or other about dreams. For some people, this can be very true. Somebody may walk up to you one day and said, I had a dream about you last night, and this is what happened, and I'm worried. Watch out. That happens. But for most people, not so much. I'll also say that God can and does speak to us through dreams. That's fully biblical. And when God does, we will know it. We don't have to sit down with a dream journal and try to figure out what's going on in there, get in touch with our inner divinity or anything. No, when God speaks in a dream, you will know it's God speaking. And Jacob here is case and point. We find Jacob here at a very difficult time. He's fleeing for his life because, at his mother's prompting and scheming, he stole a blessing from his blind, dying father that was meant for his older twin brother Esau. But his mother, Rebekah, knew from a word that she had received from the Lord back when she was pregnant with the twins. She asked God, they were struggling, fighting, rolling around greatly in her belly, and it was driving her crazy. And why this? And God told her, you've got two nations in there. And basically the older will wind up serving the younger. She knew from that word that Jacob, the younger one, would be the one through whom the promise that God made to Abraham and to Isaac, that Jacob would be the one through whom that promise would come to fruition. God give them a land and make a great nation of their descendants. It's Jacob's line. She knew that would come to be through. And here Jacob is fleeing from his life from his older brother. And this kind of threatens the promise. He's leaving the land God had promised to give Abraham. And he's actually going back to the land that Abraham had come from. As if, none of this, Abraham and Isaac stuff happened. Though Jacob seems to be losing everything pertaining to God's promise to Abraham and Isaac, God comes to him in this dream to tell him he will receive it all. This tragic turn of events was not going to hinder God's plans, which would ultimately lead to God saving his whole creation from sin and death through Jesus Christ. But in the midst of what was probably Jacob's most painful and disillusioning moment of his life, God spoke to Jacob in a dream. There should be some comfort there. And this dream got Jacob on course, gave him some assurance. That happens. Don't think you're crazy if it happens, if you have a dream that seems like God is giving you some assurance, some direction. Well, something else needs to be said with respect to following our dreams. It's very popular today for people to give the advice that we should follow our dreams, meaning follow our passions, do what your deepest self wants you to do. And you do that, you'll be very happy. Go and be and do what you really want to be and do. And that's the path to happiness. It's all me-centered, Jacob here is not following his dreams like that. He's watching for God to fulfill the promise that God made to him in a dream. And people talk about following your dreams. If you do that, you'll be happiest. Well, Jacob is following this. He's following what God wants for his life. And the next 20 years of his life are actually not storybook, dream come true stuff. His life is quite difficult, full of hard work, shepherding for his father-in-law. And his father-in-law is routinely abusing him and accusing him of theft and stuff like that. But through it all, God's blessing upon Jacob, his family keeps growing. His flocks keep growing. God's blessing upon him keeps coming about. Eventually, he has to flee from his father-in-law, who pursues him with a posse, and he has to flee them and go back to the land of promise, and there face Esau. And when he gets there, he finds that Esau actually welcomes him back. He's happy to see his brother. Jacob cannot be accused of following his dreams, his passions here. He's not doing that in the pursuit of happiness. And to be, quite frank about it, that follow your dream stuff is a myth of wealthy Western culture, and quite frankly, you pretty much have to be independently wealthy to do it. What Jacob was up to. Jacob pursued what God wanted for his life, that God had promised him, and that God was making to happen. God protected him. God provided for him. His life was full of normal, hard, difficult work. It had family struggles, all the stuff that we have. In the midst of all that, God blessed him. How can we ask ourselves, ask for more? God has a purpose for us. God wants to bless us and other people's through us. Pursue that. We'll be on the right course. That's the best way I know not to leave a lot of hurt people in your wake. It's what I've seen in my 60 years of people following their dreams, pursuing what they want. There usually winds up a lot of hurt people in their wake. Pursue what God wants for your life. Seek that. It's the way to peace, the way to being a blessing. So, amen. I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite old hymns, Be Thou My Vision. And you folks have a great week, and hopefully our air quality improves. Again, our prayers for all those communities up there and the firefighters. Have a good week, and God bless you. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart. Not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best Lord in the day and the night. Waking or sleeping, thy presence my life. Be thou my wisdom, be thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, thine own may I be. Thou in me dwelling, and I one with thee. Be thou my breastplate, my sword for the fight. Be thou my armor, and be thou my might. Thou my soul shelter, and thou my high tower. Raise thou me heavenward, O power of my power. Riches